All right. You're going to like this, I think. The next two readings, this one and the next one, this is 150 and and then 151. So this is If My People Bible Reading, part 150. This this is First Kings as we end it, and then we have a PowerPoint I want you to look at. I enjoy doing. So we left you last at chapter 8, and we'll start at verse 54. When Solomon had finished all these prayers and supplications to Yahweh, he rose up before the altar of Yahweh, where he stood kneeling with his hands spread out towards heaven. And he stood up and blessed the whole assembly of Israel in a loud voice, saying, Praise be to Yahweh, who has given rest to his people Israel, just as he promised. Not one word has failed of all the good promises he gave through his servant Moses. None of his promises that were fulfilled. In other words, Yahweh kept them all. Uh, but there was always a but, and if you have to do these things, you have to call upon my name. And so Solomon was speaking the truth on that behalf, not of all the hundreds of failures that they have done, which caused the promise not to be given because it couldn't be given. I will give you all these things if you, and it is a contingency. Second of all, that Solomon was praising kneeling. That's all a wonderful thing. You don't have to point to the east or try to figure it out where it is on a cloudy day. Then he says, May Yahweh our Elohim be with us as he was with our fathers. May he never leave us nor forsake us. Well, that is a fantastic thing that Solomon said, and it didn't last long because the people went into sin again, the kings and the people. Verse 61, But your hearts must be fully committed to Yahweh our Elohim to live by his decrees and obey his commandments at this time, right then and there. So remember, they made that promise in, in the Exodus at the mountain. That was the engagement to be married. And there was a engagement supper. And technically, in Hebraic behavior, when you are engaged, you are married, and you have to be divorced if you want to be disengaged. I mean, you're not married yet. You haven't consummated the marriage, but you still have to have a divorce. So understand what that means. Yahweh had to divorce those people because they sinned with the golden calf. Point simple. Then again, 40 some odd years later, when everyone else had died off, and only Joshua and Nun, son of Nun, and Caleb were going into the promised land. The rest of the people had died off that were over age of 20 at the time they went in. They made that promise again. We will hear, we will obey, and we will do what you want. That is a salvation. That is a what we now call come to Jesus. They didn't use that back then. They just said hear and obey. That is coming to Jesus today. I give my life to Jesus Christ, and I love him forever and ever and ever and all that. Give me the Holy Ghost and let's do our thing. Okay, back then they didn't do that. They went through it's the same thing. We're no different than they are back then. Thousands and thousands of years ago, everyone has the same path to salvation. Everyone has the same path to salvation through Yeshua because he died before humanity began for all people. And he loved the whole world, meaning everyone who would hear and obey the Father. That's what he means. He doesn't mean, he just loves everybody, the axe murderer and so forth. I don't know where people get that craziness out of churches, I guess. Wow. Let's see. So then on verse 62, interesting. Then the king and all Israel with him offered sacrifices to Yahweh. Now pay attention. Solomon offered a sacrifice to fellowship offerings to Yahweh, 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep and goats. That's 142,000. And there were like 2,000 people attending at that time. So that's 144,000. Think about what I just said, especially when we get to the millennium, especially when we get to the book of Revelation, especially when we get to the 12 tribes of 12,000 apiece, 144,000 that were sanctified in the marriage ceremony. Think about that. It's kind of important to you to understand that whether you are a shepherd or whether you are a sheep. Because later on in the Revelation, you'll see that there is a specific number of people. There's those that were beheaded that will rule and reign with Yahweh. They were beheaded for holding on to the word, no matter what. Then there were the shepherds that were brought in. There's your 144,000. Okay, so the 142,000, then the other 2,000. So there's the beheaded, and there's the rest. There's the 144,000. There's your shepherds. And then later on, you're reading in Revelation that all of a sudden there's an untold amount of people standing around the throne. Untold. Those are the sheep. Those are the wedding guests at the wedding. Are they the bride of Christ? No. Why? Because they just milk toast Christians their entire life. They just didn't get off the milk. I didn't want to. It just makes me, I get a headache when I have to think. Or I just can't get on my knees. I have diabetes and all these things. You don't have to get on your knees to pray, okay? Just stop the excuses. Wow, the things I know that you're listening to me out there. You're not stupid. You've seen all these things. I make light of them because I don't want to cry. But oh my gosh, people's behavior is pathetic. There's a lot of guests, and that doesn't even count the billions, with the B word, billions of people who are not allowed in. They are outside the gate. They are outside the walls, gnashing their teeth. There are billions of people who will never accept Yeshua, never accept the Father. Never. So it's talking about grain offerings. It's talking about fellowship offerings. All this is going to continue, but there will not be in the millennium, there will not be sacrifices of bloody animals and guts and gore, because that ended with Yeshua. He was the final blood covering, blood atonement. He washed our sins to pureness. Okay? That's what he did. So we don't repeat. And if you do such a thing like that, which some people still do, thousands of people still do, they still sacrifice sheep on Passover, and they go through the same rituals that only the way we're supposed to do back then. It says, well, you're supposed to copy everything they did during the Exodus. They didn't do that. They told you specifically not to. They said, from here on in, after Yeshua, all that was supposed to be for a time of gathering, an ingathering, and remembrance and observance of the feasts and festivals. It doesn't say that every Easter you're supposed to lament, and you're supposed to hurriedly eat at night. You're supposed to stand there girded up in your skirts. I don't know one Jewish Messianic person, one Hebrew roots person that does exactly what they say they're supposed to, that when they're following the instructions from a Messianic Orthodox Judaism, who hates Yeshua, hates him, really hates him, and yet they're following his and their weekly from the rabbi and all the Talmud and all the mystical stuff that they come up with. They're still and they're not reading half the words. So yeah, they did eat in haste at the first time, but that was the end of it. So for the next 40 years, at that time of the year, at the same time in the festival, did they sit there and eat in haste? Did they gird themselves up? Did they put blood all over the walls of their doors? No. Did they even get? Did they even go through any of the same rituals and demands that were first given? But they did not. People get so confused with it. Just read the word and follow it. Don't listen to those people out there that think they know things. Just read it. Test everything I'm saying. So Solomon, verse 65, Solomon observed the festival at that time, and all Israel with him, a vast assembly, people from Lebo Hamath to the Wadi of Egypt. They celebrated before Yahweh our Elohim for 7 days and 7 days more, 14 in all. Catch the word there, 14 days, not 7 days. Interesting. Is that the first time you've ever heard that? 7 plus 7. Interesting. A lot of people don't do anything in the fall festival, so they're called Christians. And those who try to follow the Bible do the 7 days and then the one day. So that's the Ezra. That's the new beginnings. But what did you just read? What did you just read? Did you read about the 7 days and the one day? Or did you read it was 7 plus 7? Just telling you. It's right there. It's been there for 2,000 years plus. Even longer. I guess you get another 1,000. 3,000 years it's been there. 66. On the following day he sent the people away. They blessed the king and then they went home, joyful and glad in the heart of all the good things that Yahweh had done for his servant David and his people Israel. So then we get into chapter 9. When Solomon had finished building the temple and Yahweh in the royal palace and all had achieved all he desired to do, Yahweh appeared to him a second time, as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. And Yahweh said to him, I have heard the prayer and the plea you have made before me. I have consecrated this temple which you have built, putting my name on there forever. My eyes, my heart will always be there. As for you, if you walk before me in integrity of heart and uprightness, as David did, your father did, and do all I command and observe my decrees and laws. Verse 5, I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father when I said, you shall never fail to have a man on the throne of Israel. Now everybody pays attention to the last word. They will never fail to have a man on the throne of Israel. And they always try to prove that somehow through somebody's lineage and blood and something that the King of England, the Queen of France, or somebody is still the bloodline. That's where you get the word royal blue blood. That's where you get that from. It's from right there. But let's read the first sentence. Let's actually read a sentence. Let's just read one sentence without screwing it up. My goodness. Who's I? Yahweh. Yahweh will establish. Who's your? Solomon. Your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father when I said, you shall never fail to have a man on the throne of Israel. But then verse 4 was, as for you, if you walk before me in integrity of heart and uprightness, as David your father did, and do all I command and observe all my decrees and all my law, all my Torah, all of that, you must do. And it's conditional. It is if. So I ask you, did the people do this? No. Did the priest that handled everything in those days do that? No. Did they do all kinds of fancy stuff and they have gold bowls here and silver bowls there and spoons and everything to light candles with and then, turn on the microwave? No. Oh, they did that well, but did they obey the word right here? No. Did Solomon? Really no. So we're not to do that. And yet Hebraic Messianics want you to do it. Wrong. The Christians who don't even pay attention to it don't do it anyway because they don't pay attention to anything. Their pastor wouldn't dare read this. The pastor doesn't even understand it. They don't teach you that in theological school. I've talked to so many people in ministerial alliances, and they tell me everything, and they don't say anything about reading the Bible and defending it. It's all about how to make a buck, how to run things and keep things going. When I was in the South working there for a number of years, I would go into a small church of 200 people, and there were 39 pastors. 39 pastors in one church. Now, how can you do that? Because they were all collecting unemployment. They were all claiming this one church was their ministry. They were all living off the goods and services of cheating and lying and stealing, but being a minister of the God. And 39 ministers, 39 pastors in one church. You see a lot of things when you ask questions. A lot of things, and sometimes it's like, oh, this is what's going on in the Christian churches today. All right, when we finish this up, we're going to finish up 1 Kings, and then we got a PowerPoint from you. I think you really enjoy it.